Today, we're tackling a really important and maybe a bit chilling book, Anne Applebaum's Autocracy Inc. The Dictators Who Want to Run the World.
Yeah, it's a big one. And what we really want to do is pull out the core idea because it fundamentally changes how you should probably look at what's happening globally right now.
Absolutely. Because if you're still thinking Cold War 2.0, democracy versus communism, maybe theocrats versus secular states,
Yeah.
you're missing the real picture Applebaum paints.
Exactly. That's the old lens. The
Uh,
20th century had its ideologies, communism, fascism. Leaders often had to, or felt they had to, wrap their ambitions in some grand philosophy, even hide the greed.
Right. But these modern strongmen, different game. Applebaum argues they're not some unified ideological front. It's more like an agglomeration of companies. That phrase really stuck with me.
It's a great phrase because it captures the transactional nature. It's not about spreading a global belief system. It's about keeping power and, frankly, protecting personal wealth. Pure and simple.
And they're not shy about the wealth either, are they? Opulent palaces, massive yachts. It's all out there, unlike, say, Soviet leaders who at least pretended austerity.
Totally. The political deals are almost like business deals focused on ensuring they stay in charge and keep the assets safe.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If it's this sort of corporate structure, this Autocracy Inc., bound by greed, what does that actually look like in practice? How does it operate?
It looks like collaboration, but not based on shared values.
Yeah.
It's based on mutual benefit. The deals they strike are very practical.
Like what?
Things like helping each other soften the blow of international sanctions, sharing surveillance tech, that's a big one, and basically ensuring impunity, making sure leaders don't face consequences for their actions. The whole system it's kleptocracy gone global.
You can see it really clearly with regimes that, by rights, should be totally isolated, like Belarus. Lukashenko gets hit with sanctions, condemnation, but he's still there.
Still there. Exactly. And why? Because Autocracy Inc. provides a lifeline. You've got Chinese firms pouring money into that huge China-Belarus industrial park, which helps get around sanctions.
I remember reading about that.
And then there's Russia, giving Belarus markets for its goods, political backup at the UN. And remember in 2020 when state media staff walked out, Russia flew in their own journalists to keep the propaganda machine running. It's like a support network.
A kleptocrat support network. In Venezuela, same story, right? Maduro's regime faced massive sanctions, international outrage over brutality, yet it hangs on.
Yeah, same playbook. They get loans from Russia. Iran invests in their oil sector. Turkey helps with illicit gold trading. Cuba sends security advisors and tech.
And China provides the tools for repression.
Crucially, yes. Applebaum details how they used Chinese surveillance gear, Chinese water cannons, tear gas canisters, all that stuff to crush the protests in 2014 and 2017. So it's a full package. Cash, security, and sort of political breathing room outside the normal rules.
Okay, this is where it gets, I think, really uncomfortable, especially for listeners in democratic countries. We need to talk about how the West, how we enabled this. That whole idea of Wongol Dirch handle.
Change through trade.
Yeah.
That was the big post-Cold War hope, wasn't it? The idea that if we just traded with authoritarian states, opened up our economies, they'd naturally become more like us, more democratic.
Germany's Ostpolitik with the East Bloc was the blueprint.
It was, and it just went global. We thought, hey, liberal democracy won, globalization will make everyone play by our rules. While we were thinking that, Putin and his circle were basically using that very openness to build what Applebaum calls an authoritarian kleptocracy from day one.
And you have to look at the origins. It wasn't about ideology. It was about, theft, wasn't it? That St. Petersburg food swindle back in '92.
Exactly. A foundational story. Putin, working for the mayor's office, hands out licenses to export raw materials, timber, oil, metals, whatever.
Yeah.
Supposedly the money was going to buy food for the city.
But it didn't.
Nope. The materials were shipped out, but the money just vanished. Straight into the offshore accounts of Putin's friends. Classic kleptocracy right from the start.
And here's the kicker. That scheme couldn't have worked without Western complicity. You needed Western companies buying the stuff, Western banks moving the money, Western regulators not asking too many questions.
Precisely. The entire global financial system, with its layers of secrecy, was basically tailor-made for this kind. Think about the St. Petersburg real estate holding company implicated in laundering drug money. It needed partners and shell companies set up in places like Germany and Liechtenstein. The infrastructure for hiding dirty money was already there.
It's staggering, and it just continued. How does Rosneft, the Russian state oil giant, pull off a major IPO in London.
When the prospectus itself basically warned investors, it said the company's value came from assets that were questionably acquired UCOs, essentially, and that the government running it might have interests different from shareholders. And still, the London Stock Exchange let it happen.
It's just, wow, a massive failure of oversight, or maybe just willful blindness.
Call it what you want, but the result was that Western financial efficiency didn't just fail to spread democracy. It actively helped build the financial plumbing that these autocrats now use against us.
This global moneyland, as Oliver Bullough calls it, Applebaum gives this stunning U.S. example, the Ukrainian oligarch, Ihor Kolomoisky.
Oh yeah, the Kolomoisky case is wild. He allegedly laundered billions stolen from Ukraine's largest bank, private bank.
By buying up property in the American Midwest,
Yeah.
steel mills, office towers.
Exactly, including a steel plant in Warren, Ohio. And because of loopholes in U.S. law, particularly around real estate anonymity, he could hide the ownership. He allegedly bought these assets, stripped them, ran them into the ground. That Ohio steel plant shut down. Hundreds of jobs lost.
So, laundered money from Ukraine directly leads to economic devastation in Ohio. It completely collapses that us versus them idea. It's happening right here.
It really does. And if they can stash their money so easily in London or New York or Miami, why would they ever worry about international norms or sanctions? It breeds impunity.
So, what does that impunity let them do back home?
It lets them fundamentally change how they govern. Think back to Khrushchev banging his shoe at the UN in 1960. There was still this sense, maybe, that global opinion mattered, even for the Soviets.
Right, some level of performance for the world stage.
But today's autocrats, many adopt what Applebaum calls the Maduro model. They seem perfectly willing to preside over economic ruin, mass immigration, total international isolation, as long as they personally stay in power.
There's no shame anymore. The Myanmar junta gunning down protesters in broad daylight. The Chinese government running camps for Uyghurs in Xinjiang openly. The brutality isn't hidden, it's almost flaunted.
And their shared enemy isn't really another country or ideology, it's the very idea of the democratic world. Accountability, transparency, rule of law, independent courts, a free press. Those are the threats.
Threats from outside, but also from their own people who might want those things.
Absolutely, we see it spelled out. Remember, China's document number 9 from 2013, this internal Communist Party memo identified the biggest dangers, top of the list. Not the U.S. Navy, not economic collapse. It was Western constitutional democracy and universal values.
The biggest threat is an idea.
Exactly. And in Russia, the obsession is the color revolution. Those popular uprisings in Georgia, Ukraine in the early 2000s, they genuinely spooked Putin.
The Rose Revolution, the Orange Revolution?
Yeah. So the Kremlin propaganda machine constantly hammers this theme. Any popular protest, any civic movement demanding change, it's always a foreign plot. A CIA-funded scheme to destabilize Russia.
Which gives them the perfect excuse to crush any dissent. It's not politics, it's treason.
Precisely. And the tools they use now are increasingly sophisticated, especially digital ones. We used to think the internet couldn't be controlled, remember?
Yeah. How wrong we were. China built the Great Firewall, and ironically, Western tech companies initially helped them do it. Cisco, Microsoft, Yahoo.
They did. But it's evolved way beyond just blocking websites now. It's about surveillance and predictive control.
It's terrifying there.
It really is. Mandatory apps on phones that scan for forbidden content, voice samples collected, DNA swabs, tracking electricity usage to see if someone's home when they shouldn't be. It's all designed to spot potential dissenters before they can organize, to eliminate resistance before it even starts.
And this control mindset extends beyond their borders, right?
Yes.
Into the information space.
Oh, absolutely. The goal of their international propaganda isn't really to sell their own system anymore. It's mostly about sowing cynicism and division in democracies.
Making us doubt ourselves.
Exactly. Russian state TV beams out stories about decadent, collapsing Europe. Chinese state media talks about January 6th as America's karma. The message is, democracy is messy, corrupt, hypocritical, don't lecture us.
How do they spread this stuff so effectively?
Through what Applebaum calls information laundering. They use complex networks of fake news sites, like that Doppelganger or RRN network. They use typo-squatting, setting up sites that look exactly like, say, The Guardian or Fox News, but with a slightly different web address.
Like Reuters.cfd instead of Reuters.com.
Stuff like that, yeah. And they pump out completely fabricated stories. Remember the biobirds nonsense during the Ukraine war? The claim that Ukraine was weaponizing migratory birds to spread disease in Russia? Utterly insane, but it gets picked up and spread.
And when these regimes have zero respect for international law, it starts to affect ordinary people in democracies too, this transnational repression.
It's a direct threat. The most shocking example has to be the Ryanair hijacking in 2021.
Unbelievable. Lukashenko basically scrambles a fighter jet to force down a commercial airliner flying between two EU countries.
Just to grab one dissident journalist, Roman Protasevich, who's on board, a flagrant violation of, well, everything. Aviation law, sovereignty, and the network basically shrugged. No real consequences from his autocratic allies.
And then you have things like those secret Chinese police stations turning up in places like New York, Dublin, Toronto.
Right. Used to monitor and harass Chinese citizens living abroad. It shows they don't feel bound by borders or the laws of other countries. It erodes safety and the rule of law everywhere.
So, looking at the immediate threat landscape, Autocracy Inc. isn't just a collection of bad actors. They coordinate, they seize opportunities.
Yes, there's this opportunistic collaboration. Applebaum points to late 2023 as an example of this sort of polycrisis.
You had the horrific Hamas attack on Israel, then the Houthi attacks on shipping, major distractions for the West.
And at the same time, you see a massive surge in coordinated online campaigns pushing Ukraine fatigue in the US and Europe, often amplified by voices known to have financial ties to Russia. It's like hitting multiple pressure points at once: military, economic, information.
And inside their own countries, they have methods beyond just brute force. This idea of civil death.
It's not always about killing dissidents, though they do that too, obviously. Yeah. It's about destroying their reputation, smearing them. They flip the script. They take the charge universally leveled against them, corruption, and they throw it back at the pro-democracy activists. They frame them as frauds, traitors, agents of foreign powers, people just in it for the money.
Like what happened to Pastor Evan Mawire in Zimbabwe.
Exactly. He led huge anti-corruption protests, and the state media machine went into overdrive, painting him as a scammer funded by outsiders. It's incredibly effective because it taps into existing public cynicism.
It lets ordinary people think, see, they're all crooks. He's no better than the guys in charge. Why should I risk anything? It breeds apathy.
It's a toxic, paralyzing cynicism. But there's a counter template. And ironically, it comes from Alexei Navalny, who was the target of exactly this kind of smear.
His anti-corruption investigations.
Yes, especially the film about Putin's ridiculous palace on the Black Sea. It was so effective because it wasn't abstract. It showed the obscene scale of the theft, the gold toilet brushes, and implicitly connected it to the lousy pensions and crumbling hospitals ordinary Russians deal with. It made the link visceral.
So that suggests a way forward. If the problem is autocratic behavior, especially kleptocracy, then the fight has to target that behavior. And Navalny's approach suggests transparency is key.
Absolutely. Applebaum argues the single most powerful thing democracies can do is dismantle financial secrecy. And anonymous shell companies demand total transparency for who really owns property in London, Miami, Geneva.
Pull back the curtain on Moneyland.
If you take away their ability to hide and move stolen assets easily through our systems, you hit Autocracy Inc. right where it hurts. You dismantle their protective infrastructure.
And economically, beyond just finance.
We need to get serious about de-risking. It's not necessarily about full decoupling, which might be impossible, but we have to reduce our dependence on autocratic states for critical resources that they can and do weaponize.
Things like rare earth minerals, lithium, cobalt for batteries.
Yeah, advanced semiconductors, certain pharmaceuticals. We need secure, reliable supply chains within the democratic world or with trusted partners. We can't be vulnerable to blackmail when the next crisis hits.
Okay, so pulling it all together, the big takeaway from Applebaum is that we're not fighting communism or Islamism in some grand ideological clash. We're up against a network defined by specific behaviors: kleptocracy, information warfare, transnational repression.
Yeah, a flexible, globalized set of bad behaviors that actually exploits our openness, our financial systems, our freedom of information.
And it's corrosive because, as we saw with Kolomoisky in Ohio, this isn't just happening over there. These autocratic networks and their dirty money are operating inside our countries, distorting our markets, and potentially influencing our politics.
That's a crucial point. The dividing line isn't just between countries anymore, it runs through them. The fight is against these autocratic practices wherever they pop up, including within democracies, when enabled by our own laws or indifference.
We tend to think of the West as the main source of global influence, spreading democracy, setting norms.
Right. But Applebaum forces us to confront that influence now flows powerfully in the other direction too. Autocratic money and disinformation are actively contaminating our own systems. So If building the coalition to help Ukraine wasn't automatic, wasn't inevitable.
Then building an effective anti-kleptocracy coalition won't be either.
Exactly. So maybe the thought to leave everyone with is this. Given this new landscape, what piece of an international anti-kleptocracy effort could you help build or support? How do we make sure that exposing the truth, like Navalny did, actually leads to justice and accountability, not just more cynicism?